What's up, party people? Welcome to another episode of the Working Writer Podcast. It's your girl, Charla Lauriston, and I'm here with another episode. I know it's been a minute. Guys, I think at this point, if you've been a follower of the podcast, then you know to just expect episodes when they come, and your girl is just going to give you what she got when she got it. That's where I'm at. If you're joining for the first time, welcome. If you are coming back and a longtime listener, then welcome back. Welcome home. Today's episode is all about the writer's room. I realized for a podcast called The Working Writer, I don't think I've ever done a straight up tutorial episode about the writer's room. Specifically, we're talking about the television writer's room in the United States. There's television writer's rooms all over the world, but I've only worked in the United States. So that's what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking today about the entire process from interviewing for the writer's room all the way to turning in your draft when you ultimately get into one. If writer's rooms still exist by the time this episode comes out, who knows? AI is moving so quickly. But hey, or even if you're in the writer's room right now, I'm going to be talking about ways to win and stand out and be confident in the writer's room. So settle in and let's jump into the episode. I'm Charla Lauriston. I've been a TV writer for almost a decade, but it wasn't that long ago that quitting my day job and moving to Hollywood was nothing but a pipe dream. After lots of failures, many mistakes, and many lessons learned, I've now written for 7 TV shows, 2 features, and sold 3 TV pilots. I've done all this through imposter syndrome, burnout, and with zero roadmap. On the Working Writer Podcast, I pull back the curtain on breaking in and teach screenwriters and creatives how to thrive both personally and professionally. Without further ado, let's get to work. Let's jump right in and talk about the interview process for the writer's room. I've written in, I think, about 7 writer's room. It might be more. I'm not counting right now, but pretty much every interview has been the same. And the thing that I think is the most important thing to recognize about the interview process for the writer's room is that by the time you've gotten to the writer's room interview, you've already been vetted by multiple levels of people. You've potentially already been vetted by reps, managers, and agents. You've already been vetted by producers, who are the ones who are tasked with getting the scripts together, presenting the strongest writers, the ones that they feel whose voices might be most valuable to the story they're trying to tell. You've been through multiple vetting processes. So congratulate yourself just for getting to the interview process. That means that you stood out. That means that your voice was deemed valuable or potentially valuable to be in that room. So I think it's important to recognize that you beat out a lot of people just by getting to the interview process. They've already read your script. Even if your script wasn't the strongest, even if it's just that you have a point of view or maybe your identity, I feel like a lot of times people try to put down when you're the only Black writer in the room, when you're the only Latino writer, when you're the only gay person, the only trans person or whatever. Sometimes your identity is the point of view that is needed and will be valuable to the room, and who you are really is the thing that brought you to the writer's room. So there's nothing to be ashamed about or to feel like it's less than in any way if you are the only Black writer or if you've come in through a program that was seeking voices that are underrepresented. This was one thing that I always felt in writers' rooms, that there would be this thing of kind of like putting people down for coming in through alternative channels. But the whole purpose of looking at alternative channels is that it's not easy to find those voices because those voices are being kept out of the vetting process. They're being kept out of these opportunities. So that's all I'll say on that. Come in confident, come in knowing that you've already gone through a serious vetting process, and know that there's something valuable enough about you to be one of the people that they're sitting down with and putting time into for the interview process. So, because the interview process can be tedious. So I think the most important thing to do is to go into the interview confident in knowing that you already have goodwill on your side. I personally think that a lot of the interview process for writers' rooms rooms, at least in my experience, has really been about, okay, so we read this person, we read their script, we think they're cool, we think they potentially have something to bring to the writer's room. And the interview process is really just seeing, are you cool in person? Do you have fun to be around? Do you have good conversation skills? Because so much of the writer's room process is conversational. It's contributing to the conversation, pitching a lot. So I usually call the pitching process a stand-up show sitting down because you're really trying to demonstrate your POV. You're trying to demonstrate how you see the world, how you envision executing a particular project. And I feel the same about the writer's room interview. I kind of feel like it is an audition for what you're going to be like in the writer's room. Are you going to be someone who's talkative? Are you going to be somebody who is easy to get along with? Are you going to be someone who tells your opinion or who's super shy and held back? These are the kinds of things that people are looking at when you come into the writer's room. I've had writer's room interviews that were literally just chatting. We were just chatting. And that's how the showrunner or the producer, whoever is interviewing you, that's what they're basing it off of. Did I like the conversation with this person? Did this person say anything that made me feel connected to them in any way? I've had interviews where it's been like a tribunal, where it's been like, I remember when I was interviewing for Hoops on Netflix, that's an animated comedy. It was literally like a line of 8 people. And it was literally Jake Johnson was there. It was from Jake Johnson to the showrunner to the producers that had reached out to me. Everybody was there and they were all facing me. They were all sitting at a table facing me and I was facing them. And, luckily for me, this had been like maybe the 6th or 7th writer's room that I'd already been in. So I'd been through the interview process a lot. Like the fact that everybody was looking at me did not stress me out. I feel like you have to come ready for every type of potential interview. And that particular interview felt like it was like a pitch session. Like I always come ready. I've read the script multiple times. I've jotted down notes about what I thought about character, about story, about everything. So I come into every interview prepared for whatever the style of interview is, whether it is a tribunal kind of thing like that, where everybody's waiting for you to pitch. Everybody's waiting for you to give them ideas to get a sense of your sense of humor. In that situation, you want to make sure that you are, Hoops is a comedy room, so you want to make sure that you're making people laugh as much as possible. If you are someone who is funny, you're probably somebody who is funny because if you're in a comedy writer's room interview, you're probably a comedian or somebody who has, that kind of expertise or voice out there. So you want to make sure you're funny. So that particular interview, I had to be funny, I had to be on, I had to be pitching, but I've had interviews where I'm literally just with one other person and we're having a conversation and it's just about, do they like my vibes, whatever. And of course, I cracked everybody up in the Hoops interview. I came ready. I was I made sure to be opinionated because one of the things that I feel like is important to understand is that your point of view is your gold. And you already know this if you're a comedian or if you're somebody who comes from a comedy background. The way that you express yourself, the point of view that you have, that is your comedy gold because that is what makes you unique. Your voice is what makes you unique, and your voice is as much as possible what you're trying to get across when you're in these interviews. So my tips for you for interviewing is number 1, come in confident, knowing that you have already made it far and already be proud of yourself for the fact that you even got into the interview room. Wonderful. Congratulations. Number 2, come ready for whatever type of interview it is, whether it is literally people waiting for you to pitch and make them laugh and tell them what you thought of the script, or if it is a sit down chat that's very casual. Just come ready for whatever type of scenario it is. And in terms of preparing yourself for a writer's room interview, like I said, it's about reading the script. I would read the script at least twice. I would put my notes in the margins. I'd make sure that anything I thought of to bring up, if I had any questions about the script, just being as engaged as possible with the material and showing that you're really interested in the material and have something to say about the material, have something to contribute to the material, because that's going to be your job in the writer's room. And I would say, thinking of any jokes, particularly if it is a comedy writer's room, like all of my experiences in comedy writer's rooms, I feel like I would even want to bring somebody on from a drama room to talk about what you should prepare for in terms of a drama interview. But I expect it would be very similar. I expect it would be being as engaged as possible with the material, knowing the material, having something to say about the material, having something to contribute, whether it is your life experience, whether it is from your identity, whatever it is that you got to contribute, whatever is unique about you is what you need to be bringing to this. And of course, enthusiasm and a show of, I'm going to be happy to be here. Not in a way where it's like walk all over me, take advantage of me, but I'm genuinely excited to be here. I'm so happy to be in this interview, have questions for them. As I got further into my career, would do all kinds of background, checks as much as possible. Like I would ask my manager and my agents if they know any of the producers or the executives that are that are going to be in the room. Do they know how they run the room? Because every room is different. A lot of times I want to know, what are the hours going to be like? And a lot of times I wouldn't get straight answers back, because that's kind of information that you would have had to have been in the room with that person to know how they run the room. So that information's a little bit difficult to get a hold of. But if I knew another writer that worked in a room with that showrunner or that producer or that executive or whatever, I would ask them, do they know anything? Do they have any tips? So I would do my little, investigation here and there whenever I could, but I feel like that is less important. That's less important. That's more, that kind of investigation is more if you get an offer and you're trying to decide if you want that job, to ask those questions, or even if it's just to get you mentally prepared for succeed as much as possible in that room. That's good kind of intel to get at that stage. But before you get the offer, the most important thing is that you are engaged, you're enthusiastic, you are ready to contribute, you are yourself as much as possible. You are yourself as much as possible. You are yourself as much as possible. And that read and know the material and have something to contribute, and that you're ready to talk and you're ready to hang out. You're ready to be present with these people during this interview. All right. So that's the first thing, how to interview for the writer's room. Next, let's talk about what you need to know before you even get into the writer's room. So the thing that I thought was super surprising to me, as somebody who knew nothing about writer's rooms when I entered, and someone who had always been in traditional 9 to 5s, is that I was genuinely shocked at the absolute absence of training when you enter the room. They don't even train you on how they do it. So it doesn't matter. And what I've learned is that there's just standards in every writer's room of generally how they work. And the general standards for how writer's rooms work is that you come in fully trained, knowing how to write a script. So that means that you know how to format a script, you are familiar with Final Draft, that you know what script and TV jargon sounds like. And a lot of time that jargon is script writing. It's knowing what a slug line is. It's knowing what a blow to a scene means. It means like learning the rule of threes if you're a comedy writer, because a lot of times comedy writers have come through this UBC and groundling system, and we know all of this terminology that 100% prepares you to be in the writer's room, because you're using a lot of that same terminology. So if you are wanting to be in a writer's room and you have not yet had any kind of training, it's a good idea to get yourself into a script writing class. potentially to read a book on script writing. I have books that I have recommended and I'll recommend in the description. And of course, I have a Zero to Pilot class that teaches you all of that. So you have to come into the writer's room fully trained on how to write a script. Nobody's going to tell you anything. You need to know how to break story. You need to know 3-act structure. If you're in a comedy writer's room, if you're in a drama room, then you need to know, I think it's 5-act structure in most drama rooms. Correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but you need to know all that. No one's going to sit there and be like, okay, this is how to break story when you get into a writer's room. No one's going to sit there and be like, okay, this is a slug line. This is how you format. Nobody's going to do that. You need to come in fully ready to do that. There is zero training. So that's number one. You need to come in fully understanding how to do all of that. The next thing that you need to know is what your job is in the writer's room. And it's actually similar. It has a lot to do with what I talked about in the interview process, which is your job in the writer's room is number one, to contribute. Full stop. Contribute your opinion, contribute your ideas, piggyback off of people, bring in your own experience. If you've dated a lot and it's a show about dating, if it's a sex life of college girls, you've been to college, you dated in college, you're going to be bringing those relevant experiences to the writer's room. Your job is to contribute. And one of the issues that I had early on in my writer's room career is that I was just really shy and I would get really psyched out, because I'm in the room with these really funny people and I would get in my head and I would just get so psyched out. And now I look at it as an opportunity to overcome imposter syndrome, to overcome overthinking, to overcome shyness, because it is an opportunity to get out of your comfort zone, to think outside of your insecurities, and it's one of the reasons, and learning how to do this is one of the reasons why I started teaching mindfulness, because again, guys, I've started to talk about mindfulness so much because it's such a powerful tool, particularly if you are ADHD, if you have imposter syndrome, if you are just really scared of shining, if you're scared of being visible. Practicing mindfulness is going to be really important for you because you're going to start to notice the feelings that come up in your body whenever you are anxious, whenever you are editing yourself, whenever you're overthinking, whenever you're being a perfectionist. I put it in a workshop called Mindfulness for Creatives. That workshop is free and it's going to be down in the description. And it's just a practice that you have to do over and over to really address those fears and those anxieties that come up when you're in the writer's room so that you can be the best contributor that you can be. Because God forbid, in a few writer's rooms, I really let this happen to me. I let the fear overtake me. I let the imposter syndrome overtake me. I let the perfectionism overtake me. And of course, I forgive myself. I've learned, I've grown. It was a necessary growth process that was extremely uncomfortable and extremely valuable to notice when I was being a perfectionist, when I was editing myself, when I was being quiet because I was afraid that something wouldn't be funny. So the things that you have to prepare for mentally in the writer's room is to be prepared to be seen, prepared to not get a laugh, prepared to not get your scenes into the final script, prepared to get your script rewritten a bunch and often. And really getting comfortable with being a contributor and detaching from the outcome, detaching from needing to be the funniest person, detaching from needing to always be right or to always get your stuff in, to just really detach from that and just remember that your job is to contribute your ideas, your point of view, your experiences, just as much as possible. That is your job, is to contribute. And if you want to grow as a writer, being in those uncomfortable positions are going to be really helpful and important to you, because those uncomfortable, difficult experiences of having imposter syndrome, of being afraid to speak up. They're going to be such fantastic character growth for you if you see it that way. It's going to be such fantastic growth for you as an artist, as a creative, as a writer, if you allow yourself to grow through those uncomfortable experiences. And again, one of the ways that you can practice that is with mindfulness. And I'll put that Mindfulness for Creatives workshop down in the description. So that's the second thing. So now let's talk about, now that we've talked about how to interview for the writer's room, what the expectations are for you when you enter the writer's room, let's talk about how the writer's room really works. And I'll go through week by week. When the first week of the writer's room, sometimes the first 2 weeks, if there's a lot of time, which I think is almost a thing of the past. Every writer's room that I've been in has like had less and less time. So the first week is usually just introductions. It's really about just getting to know everybody. Let's say the first day. The first day is really about getting to know each other. So maybe there's introductions in the writer's room. Maybe you're telling people about where you're from and what other rooms you've worked in, whatever. Usually it's really not about your other jobs. It's about who you are as a person and just getting to know everybody. And then usually on the first day also we'll read the script. Everybody will read the script individually. Maybe they'll go to their office for a bit, find a place to read, and then come back at the end of the day with notes on the pilot script, with, ideas about the pilot script, and so on and so forth. That's usually what we're doing in the first day or two of the writer's room, because for the most part, if it's a new room, if it's the beginning of a show, that means the pilot has been sold. Potentially the pilot has been filmed, but there's always reshoots, there's always rewrites of the pilot once the writer's room starts. So the first day is usually about looking at the pilot, rereading it as a group, coming back and everybody giving their opinion about what could potentially be changed, what could be improved, any punch-ups that we can make, and if there are any reshoots, what we're going to be doing and adding to the reshoots. So that's usually the first day. I would say that the next day or the next days in that first week is called blue sky. It's really the blue sky process where as a group, we now start to brainstorm the entire season. We start to think about character arcs, story arcs, and we're really just pitching all day. And usually the night before, your showrunner will have given you things to think about for the next day, maybe prompts for pitches. Maybe they want pitches on certain characters, and maybe they want pitches on certain storylines. You'll get that assignment the night before, come in ready the next day, ready to pitch your heart out. You're going to be pitching a lot. So it's actually a really good exercise to get used to pitching, get used to talking, get used to getting your ideas out there. And pitching in itself is an art. So giving yourself patience, being patient with yourself as you get better at pitching. You're going to start to learn that the way that you pitch something actually sometimes gets it in the script, when otherwise, if you're a more inexperienced pitcher, your pitch could be good, but because of the way you said it, the way that it came across, the joke didn't really land, it doesn't really get in there. But no worries. It's a learning experience. It's about growing. It's about coming back the next day better, putting yourself out there, being open to being rejected, being open to your pitch being rejected and not being good, so that you can allow yourself to get comfortable just speaking up and just talking. So those are the first two things, intros and blue sky. We're thinking broadly about the show. We're doing a bunch of pitching. And then the third or fourth day, there might be rewrites to the pilot, because now we have an idea of what the season arc might be, what the character arcs might be, what the story arcs might be. So we might be planting seeds in the pilot. So we might be doing some rewrites of the pilot, because now we have new scene ideas for the pilot. We have new points of view, new information that needs to be added to the pilot. So there's going to be a pilot rewrite potentially in that first week. So you can see how we're really just getting right into it. We're getting right into getting the pilot ready to either be reshot or just to fit better into the stories that we want to tell for the season. And that's what we're going to be, where we are. So after we write the pilot, so after there's a pilot rewrite, if that is what's happening in the room, then you're going to start jumping into breaking story for episode 2. And this makes me feel like, now that I'm talking about it, that I might need to do an episode on breaking story, because breaking story, I think, is one of the most, if not the most important skill that you need in the writer's room. And it was one that I personally felt that it was hard to come by because I hadn't written that many scripts before I got into the writer's room. So it really took a long time for me to learn how to break story. So I might do an episode on that. If you want that, put that in the chat. Let me know. So after we do a pilot rewrite, then we're jumping into writing episode 2. We're jumping into breaking story for episode 2. And we usually do this as a full group. And I say that because a lot of times in the writer's room, because after week 1 starts, things really start moving quite quickly. We start breaking story for episode 2. We potentially start also doing reshoots for the pilot. After you break story and you have a breaking story means, and for my super new people, breaking story means deciding the beats of the story, literally deciding what happens in the story. And after you're breaking story for episode 2, after you have a solid idea or a general idea of what episode 2 is going to be, what the A story, the B story, the C story is going to be, we usually send a synopsis of that. It's usually called a 1-pager or maybe a 2-pager, where you just write briefly in 1 to 2 pages what happens in the A, B, and C story for episode 2. That goes off usually to producers, to executives. Like, let's say it's a TBS show. And let's say, I remember when I was working on The Last OG, and Monkey Paw was the production company. So you'd send that 2-pager to both TBS and you'd send it to Monkey Paw, because these are the executives and the producers that are in charge of this show. So they need to be kept up and know what's going on in the episodes in the show. So you send that off to them. Usually while you're waiting to get a response from the 2-pager, because it needs to have there's always like levels of approval. So we're basically just waiting for everyone to agree that this is a good enough story to continue to work on. We're usually working on the pilot still. And this goes on for the rest of the writer's room. We're usually working on 2 episodes at a time. You're either working on breaking story for one, shooting one, editing one, while you are going out to outline with one, and then you're doing a table read for one, and then someone's off to write the script for another one. Sometimes even 3 episodes are being worked on at the same time. You're doing final touches on the pilot while you send somebody off to write the script for episode 2. And then this is usually when the writer's room kind of breaks up. If it's a group of 8 in the writer's room, they'll usually split the room up into 4s, sometimes even smaller groups if they're more experienced writers, into even smaller groups, so that someone is in charge and moving each episode forward. So we go from breaking story to writing a 1 to 2-pager that goes out to executives, production team. And then after the 2-pager is approved, we're writing an outline. We're usually writing that outline as a team, just like we broke story as a team, as a group. After the outline is written, that again goes out for approval. Sometimes there's changes that are made to that outline. And then once everybody agrees, meaning the production team, the executives, the actual showrunners, then that outline is handed to one writer, and that one writer, who is usually the writer who gets the credit for the episode, that writer goes off and writes a draft of that script by themselves. I think a lot of times they'll give you a week to yourself. You can do that from home a lot of times, to write your script. While that writer is out writing that script, the rest of the writers are probably working on 2 other episodes at that time, whether they are breaking the story for episode 3 or they're on the outline for episode 4 or whatever. Basically, it just works like a fast moving train is how I like to describe it, because that's how it feels. So when the writer comes back with their draft, the whole team reads that draft, and everybody goes to their separate offices or chills somewhere in the writer's room as they read that draft and put their notes in. And then we all gather back together and we all give notes and cuts and just ideas and punch ups and all kinds of things for, it's usually just a broad overview of what our notes are for the script. And then after we give our notes for the script, there is a group rewrite of that script usually. And after the group rewrite of that script is sent off once again to executives in production. And then after that script is approved, then we do a punch up pass usually in preparation for the table read. So by the time you get to a table read, the executives who are reading this script have seen it. They've seen the outline. There's no surprises. The table read is really just trying to get a sense of, is this funny? Because especially in comedy rooms, if people don't laugh, it's not going to get across on screen. If it gets across, if it's funny in the table read, it's usually funny on screen. Like it's why stand up and sketch and these kinds of things are such great training for comedy writers' rooms, because that's basically what you're doing in the writer's room. Is you have a good sense of what would make people laugh in a live audience, then you definitely have a good sense of what would make people laugh in a script. So after the table read, we all take notes as writers about what worked in the table read, what didn't work. And once again, we gather again to give our opinion about what worked and what didn't work about the table read. We do another rewrite. After that rewrite, then that script is ready to be shot. So like I said, multiple things can be going on at once, but that's generally the life cycle of a script. It goes from breaking story all the way to preparing it to be shot. Even then, the person who's in charge of that episode, the writer of that episode, will usually, if it's a particularly good writer's room and they want writers to get trained on every step of the process, then you can give some notes on the edit. You'll be able to be one of the first ones to see the edit and give your opinion on that. And then we start the whole process all over again for episode 3, which a lot of times has already been being worked on by another group. And now everybody is coming in to give notes on the outline, give notes on the draft, give notes on the table read script, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, there's not a lot of room for your ego really as a writer in the writer's room process, because it's so fast moving. It needs so many ideas. By the time you get to the end of a season in a writer's room, thousands of ideas have been pitched. Thousands of ideas have been pitched. You should have pitched hundreds of those ideas yourself. And the vast majority of those ideas will not be used. The vast majority of those ideas are what led us to the product that we have at the very end. And your job, like I said, is really just to contribute as much of those ideas as possible, because that is your job. And that's what's going to make you a good contributor to the writer's room, is actually contributing. So the last thing I want to talk about is how to succeed in the writer's room. And I've already mentioned quite a bit of this. I've mentioned that your job is to contribute. And if you are scared to contribute, if you're scared to be seen, then to see the struggle or the difficulty of being seen as an opportunity to grow, as an opportunity to overcome the fears, to overcome the perfectionism, to overcome the imposter syndrome. I do a lot of that kind of work in my one-on-one coaching. So if that's something that you're experiencing, I'm happy to have you as a client. You can sign up on the website. So these things are opportunities to grow, and they should be approached as such. I think another thing to remember about dealing with imposter syndrome when it comes to being in the writer's room is that you are an imposter, especially if it's your first writer's room. And so if you are in your first writer's room, you don't have a lot of experience, and it's totally normal to be nervous until you feel like you have a grasp of your job, until you feel like you're confident in your abilities. And I think the most important thing to do when you're experiencing imposter syndrome, particularly when you're new, is to be patient and compassionate with yourself, is to have a beginner's mind and to really not be afraid to ask questions, not be afraid to appear dumb. Take advantage of the fact that you are new and this is your first room, and just ask a lot of questions so that you feel like you know what you're doing and you can be confident in your job. Another thing to be aware of is that A lot of writers' rooms don't work like normal or traditional 9 to 5s where you get feedback. Because as you know, like I said earlier in the video, you don't get any training. So you also don't get any feedback. Nobody's going to sit there and tell you, I mean, unless it's a really organized writer's room, like this is how it's going to work. And then at this point in the writer's room, I'm going to sit you down and give you feedback on how you're doing. That has only ever happened in the Grand Crew Writers Room, and it has never happened in any other room. I've never gotten feedback on how I'm doing in a room other than in the Grand Crew Writers Room. So it's really rare for you to get feedback on how you're doing. A lot of times, a lot of writers are drowning in anxiety because they think they're doing really poorly. They don't know if they're going to be hired back, blah, 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 whatever. You usually don't get any feedback. And a lot of times the only feedback you're gonna get is being hired back. And if you are hired back, then that should be all you need to know about how you're doing, because they could easily not bring you back. And you should know that if they don't bring you back, sometimes it's not personal. Sometimes maybe it is. Maybe, your vibes didn't really fit the room. Your sense of humor didn't really fit the room. Your point of view didn't really fit the room. Maybe they found another person that they want to bring in. There's all kinds of reasons why they don't bring people back for rooms. So as much as possible, I would not take it personally if you're not brought back, but also know that if you are brought back, then this is potentially the only feedback you're going to get on whether or not you did well or whether or not they enjoyed having you in the room and saw your contribution as valuable. So the less you take all of it personally, the better, because again, this is not like a traditional 9 to 5 where there's HR, where there's training, where there's structured feedback as you go along in the writer's room process. So just know that a lot of times, a lot of people are just hanging around drowning in anxiety, not knowing if they're doing well. And it's just not always a part of the job. Like, you should know the way to tell if you're doing well is, am I contributing every day? Am I directly trying to improve my pitches so that they get in more? And am I getting more comfortable being seen, being visible? That's how you should really evaluate how you're doing, because it's really the evaluation that is what matters. Your own self-growth in the room. How good can you get every day at contributing? How good can you get every day at sharing your point of view authentically and honestly? If I haven't said it already, be yourself. If I haven't said it already, be yourself as much as possible. And notice when you're not being yourself. Notice when you are masking. Notice when you are suppressing yourself or editing yourself, because particularly in writers' rooms, and I actually think, I was going to say particularly in comedy writers' rooms, but I actually think it goes for writers' rooms across the board, that the more yourself you are, the more valuable you are as a writer. I personally think that there are so many talented and gifted people that your one true gold is who you are. It's your authenticity. It's your point of view. It's your history. It's your experiences. That's what you're bringing to the room, is you. So be you. Let people see you. Let people be able to engage with you as you are, whether you're shy, whether you're corny, whether you're nerdy. There's room for you. Make room for yourself. Take up space as yourself as much as possible in the room. And the last thing that I want to tell you and talk about is that the writer's room is just one part of your job once you do get into the writer's room. Again, knock on wood that writer's rooms even still exist, gang. Like, honestly, I don't even know. Like, AI is really, like, every time I see the news, I'm just like, I don't know what we're going to do. But in the meantime, when things are still here, when you get into the writer's room, particularly if it is your first one, just know that that's just one part of your job, is being in the writer's room. Another part of your job is continuing to write original scripts, continuing to get other jobs like maybe OWAs, open writing assignments. Maybe you're writing a feature. Maybe you're doing a directorial debut. Maybe you're doing a short. Always make sure to keep your career broader than the room that you're in currently. And there's several reasons for this. Number one is because a lot of TV shows have a short shelf life. You don't know if they're going to get more than one season. So it just makes sense to make sure that your career is robust outside of that writer's room. And if you are in a particularly demanding writer's room, the hours are long, you're doing a lot of writing, it's cognitively very demanding for you, of course, only work in that room at that time. You don't need to be doing multiple things at the same time if you are not mentally able to, if you're too exhausted. Absolutely. Just know that once you have ended the room, you've gotten your rest, you've recharged. When you're ready, don't just sit on your haunches and do nothing. Remember that your job as a working writer is to always be attracting opportunities to yourself, creating opportunities for yourself. And the way that you do that is by having an arsenal of creative work. All right. I hope that this episode was helpful to you. That's all I've got for today for now. Until next time, get out there, get to work. If you like this episode, please like, subscribe, share, or leave a comment for the algorithm gods.